Welcome to Almost a Podcast. Today's a little bit of an unusual one. I need to find out how to get my green screen stuff to work in order to do the booths, etc. at any tournaments I attend next year. I thought I might as well use the time to record something. And so what I'm going to talk about is, for those of you that don't know, my eyesight's gone to pieces since I've been diagnosed with a prism and I find reading quite awkward. So I wasn't reading very many books, and then last year about this time I got myself an Audible subscription, and I just thought I'd talk through the books that I've read this year, because after probably not reading a single book in like 10 years or more, because my eyesight was crap, and finding time when you got kids to read a book, you need peace and quiet, and peace and quiet and kids just don't go together. So anyway, listening to audiobooks you can do it at the gym, you can do it while you're cooking, you can do it while you're working in the garage, you can do it while you're painting. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me. I can't believe it's taken me this long to get into them. But anyway, so I thought, why not spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever I can manage to put together, talking about the audiobooks I've read, maybe start some conversations if people want to tell me what audiobooks I should read next, or why the audiobooks that I think are good aren't good, and what audiobooks they think are good, or whatever. One thing that Audible allows you to do, and I'm not trying to big up Jeff Bezos or any of this bull poop, but if you don't like a book, you can just chuck it back and get your money back. And you can do that at any point, because they realise that you might not listen to a book straight away. So I have chucked some books back. One of them I was really looking forward to reading, which was like a Thrawn book, which is like a Star Wars blue-faced fella on the Empire side, who's supposed to be a really good book, but the fact that it was narrated but had sound effects really irritated me, and I don't know why that is, because I don't mind things with sound effects. I don't mind full cast stuff that obviously has sound effects, but for some reason, single person narration with sound effects really winds me up, and it didn't matter how good the story was. I just couldn't get into it, so I chucked it back. Anyway, we'll start with the kind of where I started. I was reading Bernard Cornwell's Waterloo. That was what I was reading. I was finding it really hard to read, and then Audible came up, and I don't know how it knew, but maybe it even knew that I was reading this book, or I'd bought this book, and it suggested I have it as a free Audible book. So I did, and that was a gateway drug. So if you haven't read this Bernard Cornwell book, basically he took his Sharpe's Waterloo, which may be one book, maybe two, and he kind of padded it out a bit. But basically, it's a very similar story, because the story is fixed, isn't it? And he just, instead of adding Sharpe, he'd already done the research, hadn't he? Because that's how he works. He researches a book to make it kind of have some kind of historical anchor, and then But the book was absolutely great. So I was reading it. I was about halfway through, but then I did the Audible, and so from there I went and took Agincourt, which and even, I don't know if it's bigger, but it's certainly on par with Waterloo in that battles between the English and the French, kind of like battles that changed our histories, the English and French histories. I'm not sure I could go as far as changing the world, but this was the famous one with the archers and the two fingers, and the knights getting bogged down in mud, and the English were outnumbered. Like, it's kind of contested how many they were outnumbered. They were certainly outnumbered, several to one. Some reports for 10 to 1, but I don't know about that. But anyway, so Agincourt, it's obviously more fiction than Waterloo, because Waterloo, the previous book, tended to be a bit more historically accurate, and it was talking more about letters and stuff. But obviously, letters from Agincourt, they don't really happen, because who was writing letters back then? Only very, very educated people. So the story itself is a little bit leggy. I'm not sure I really got on that well with the bowman, who was like Superman, in effect, because he could pull this bow, and everyone was in a war, he could pull this bow, and he was touched by God, and it had a little bit of like a kind of a Joan of Arc-y feel to it. It was very gruesome. I mean, if you've not got a strong stomach, the actual story itself is quite gruesome. So it's certainly not something I'd be recommending to my 11 or 15-year-old boys to read. Maybe when they're a little bit older, they could listen to it. But yeah, I'm sure medieval battle wasn't a pleasant thing. But it certainly isn't. It isn't portrayed as a nice thing at all. And no love lost for the, I don't know what kind of religion it would be. Probably Church of England at this point, I'm guessing. Or maybe I'm misremembering my history. But he certainly has no love for whatever version of Christianity is in charge. Because most of the priests are portrayed as bastards. Right, next one, Dante. I think I gave it 4 out of 5. You can actually see the ones I've bothered rating here, I guess. So I'm a big Blood Angels fan, and it was quite interesting to see how this story progressed and what his backstory was. It was written in a really weird kind of Dante as a person trying to get to the trial, and then Dante as commander. So there was kind of nice, kind of backwards and forwards, but I found it quite difficult to keep a grip on the actual story. And sometimes that happens with audiobooks. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to you'll get to the end of a chapter and realise, I don't know what bloody hell went on in that chapter, because I wasn't paying quite enough attention at the right bits. Because when you're reading on a page, 1 or 2 lines of text can make a great difference to the way a chapter or whatever is perceived. And if you miss that key line, or maybe not even a line of text in the flow, because maybe it's not emphasized enough, or maybe it's not meant to be emphasized by the narrator, that can cause, you can get to the end of a chapter and go, what the bloody hell happened there? Because just the way it is, it's quite easy to kind of drift away when you're listening to audiobooks. Brief history of the Middle Ages. So that Dante thing, it was all right. I did buy another one. I haven't finished it yet. I bought the second one, whatever it is. What can you say about this kind of pap fiction? If it's your bag, then fill your boots. But I always quote, it's like Mills and Boons for nerds. So if you know what Mills and Boons are, they're like trashy romance novels aimed at kind of middle-aged women who just buy one every week to read. It's always the same shit. It's always like whatever, rags to riches, rich prince, charming, whatever. It's the same kind of crap here, really, isn't it? It's just like pulp fiction, just whatever. If you enjoy it, fair play to you, crack on and read as much as you want. I tend to only dip in and read or listen to the stuff that actually I'm interested in the fluff of. So I'll do a couple of Blood Angels. I'm not doing Horus Heresy or any of this madness. I'm not doing 150 books or whatever the bloody hell it is. No chance. Right, so next one. Brief history of life in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages in Britain, it's a weird period because I've got to try and stay away from this mic so it doesn't get too loud. In that, I'm going to drink some tea too. Cheers. Hope everybody has a good Christmas this year. I'm going to try my bloody best. Medieval history is not something that's taught in British schools, mainly because I don't think much of it's written down. It reminds me of the kind of Monty Python and the Holy Grail kind of era. That like you just got peasants, you got people with money, and there's not really anything in between. And nobody's writing anything down, and it's just kind of the lost period. So this was quite interesting, and it talks about like the Vandals and all kinds of things. Like I don't want to get too political because that's not what we're here for. But this was an interesting book. It wasn't a particularly long book. Some of these kind of history books can be like 30 hours. I need to have a strong stomach for that. I've got a couple of them running that are like 30 hours, and I've barely nibbled at them. 30 hours is a bloody long time. Right, here we go. First of my sharp books for this time. I have got quite a few that I've bought. I haven't listened to them all. Defence of Portugal, Christmas. I think this is it's Sharp's Enemies, the actual title, isn't it? This is the one where Akeswell finally gets his comeuppance. A bastard Akeswell. So Akeswell's the running nemesis of Sharp. Some sergeant who's a bit of a bastard, to say the least. And this is where Akeswell finally gets his comeuppance for being a bastard. So it's good. The bastard count in all the sharps is like way bigger than on the TV. I mean, if they put the actual the sharps tiger red lake, oh my god! If they put the actual level of bastards in there, there'd be nothing but bastards. Bastard. So if you like sharp, little bit. It's a little bit of history, little bit of titillation in that, it's quite gruesome, like especially in the sharp's tiger. This one wasn't so gruesome, but it's sharp, isn't it? I mean, he's a bit of a, what would you call him, a Mary Sue or whatever nowadays. I don't know the vernacular, but he's a bit immortal, isn't he? He's a bit immortal. He gets dinged occasionally, but bloody hell, he should be dead 1,000 times over. Anyway, onwards and upwards. We are Legion. I got this on a 2-for-1 deal, I think. Interesting idea, in that we've got these self-replicating, whatever the frig they are. I'm trying to remember what the premise is. I think humanity's goosed. And therefore we're trying to get out into space. So we designed some self-replicating, like deep space ships, controlled by one person's personality. This Bob fella, and so that's why it becomes Bobverse. Because what happens is Bob replicates himself. So he goes out into space, finds the resources to replicate himself. And then Bob gives himself a different name, and then those two Bobs then go out and replicate themselves. And before you know, the fucking universe is full of Bobs. So this kind of talks about the kind of outward struggle of Bobs, and these Bobs kind of mingling with societies that are very primitive, and how much should they intervene? The kind of God syndrome, omnipotence. They know what's going to happen, but should they intervene when a strong power is fighting a weak power, etc. And then the second book that I read, because I think I did them back to back, and then I got a bit pissed off. I got the third one, but I haven't got round to it. I think Bobs are then fighting against, maybe they're versions of Bobs, or maybe they must be versions of Bobs. So over the thousands of years, Bobs are split up into different factions of Bobs, and now Bobs are fighting against Bobs. But obviously, each of the Bobs are quite good at building the kind of resources to do battle, because that's what they ended up having to do. They had to kind of go out into the universe and conquer. So, and I think at the end of this one, they were kind of fighting against each other, like the Bob offshoots. So the People's Front of Judea were fighting the Judean People's Front, in effect, I think, is how it worked. It's been a little while since I read it, and it really didn't leave that much of a mark. I think I gave this one 4 stars and gave this one 3 stars. I haven't even done the last one yet. I don't quite know why I've given this next one 4 stars. I'm going to change that, because I've listened to it twice in the period of a year. It's only about a 10-hour book, I think. And it's actually, it might not even be that. And it's based on the 1970s series called The Survivors. And starring, and it's narrated by, it was written by Terry Nation of Doctor Who and Blake Seven's fame, and it's narrated by Caroline Seymour, who's one of the central characters, the central character in the first season, and she stopped. It's quite a dark story. It's like a pandemic-y story, so like, but it's much worse than what we're suffering. So I think realistically, it might have been 99% of the population's dead. So the 1% that are left then have to kind of survive. And this has a different ending to the TV show at the end of the first season. It's a lot kind of, it's quite hard to say darker, but it's certainly not cheery. Because the program wasn't cheery, unfortunately, because as if you watch The Walking Dead or any of these kind of programs, once the bad stuff is stabilized, so the dead are walking around eating people or whatever, once you learn how to fight those, the problems actually come from the other humans. And the fact that society is still like dog eat dog, especially when these kind of situations happen. So you have the strong taking advantage of the weak. Sharp's Tiger, right? I started this ages ago, but I only finished it relatively recently. Mainly because it was a bit too gory even for me. It's like they have these strong men, and he was going to town on how these strong men were executing people because they didn't bother like stringing them up or hanging them or chopping their heads off or anything. It would be done kind of as an entertainment thing to kind of entertain the crowds or the troops or dignitaries or whatever. So these strong men would like wring people's necks or crush them or hammer nails into their heads or whatever. So I got a bit worn out with it in the middle. I think this year, I mean, everybody's morale's been up and down, and it was a point where my morale wasn't maybe as good as it should have been for whatever reason. Anyway, I came back and finished it. I think Sharp really started getting out of hand in this one. I've got a few more Sharp books lined up, but it's like, bloody hell. It says book one, but it certainly wasn't written as book one. I think he went back and tried to establish Sharp's backstory. And this has got the beginning of Akeswell in it. So it's got Akeswell, who is a bastard in this, for sure. An absolute bastard. And but Sharp's way too powerful. I mean, oh my God almighty. I think he kills Jetty, I think they're called, these big strong men. And they are big strong men. And he's killing like 2, 3, 4 of them at a bloody time. Fighting tigers. Shooting a tiger with some bloody crappy flintlock pistol. And he pings it in one. I'm not even sure. It was like a tiny little pistol as well. I'm not even sure it would have bloody even dented the bloody thing. But he managed to kill it in one shot. Anyway. So if you like Sharp, you're going to like this. I gave it 5 stars, so even after all, I'm saying about how strong Sharp is and how many bastards there are now, it's a bit gruesome. At the end of the day, you either like Sharp or you don't, and if you like Sharp, you're going to like this. So crack on. Next one, Ghost Gaunts, book 1. I did remember reading quite a lot of these Ghost Gaunts at the time, or whenever that was. It must be 20 years ago or more. I don't know. I read some. I don't know how many there were. Maybe I read 10 or something. But this was a decent book. I enjoyed it. I found it a little bit difficult to keep a handle on again. I think a lot of that is to do with the wordage. So if you use a lot of kind of geeky, gamey terms, so I mean, it means the things mean a lot in 40k, but unless you're kind of concentrating, it's just like word soup, in it. It's just like you're just saying crap. It's a similar thing on a book I read recently that I'll talk to when we get there. But I don't want to talk for too long because this is only supposed to be a test. And I'm already 15 more minutes in. Alexis Sale, Imaginary Sandwich Bar. You could have got it for free if you listened to it on Radio 4. I love Alexis Sale. He's like a hero of mine from the Young Ones time in the whatever that was, late 70s, early 80s. It's absolutely fantastic. If you like his humour, if you like being a someone on the left of public opinion, left wing, you'll like it. If you're not left wing, you won't like it. But Radio 4 paid for it, so I'm happy to give Alexi a few quid. It will only be a few quid. And then we were on to Dritz. Now, I think I've done, I can't remember, I think I might have done 4 Dritz books, maybe. I didn't realise, as often happens, that the first 3 books were not the first 3 books released. They went in and put in a backstory. I haven't even bothered rating them. Should I do it now? I think they were all right. I'm not going to go any further than that. Maybe I'll give them 4. I can't even be bothered talking about them separately. So I'm just going to do. There are 3 Dritz books from the first, the kind of prequel. They were all right. I guess they had to do his backstory because whatever. You can't have. For some reason, you can't have somebody with any mystery. You know, like Snake Plissken in Escape from New York. You don't know anything about him. You just know he was a badass. You don't know why he was a badass. You don't know why everybody knows him. You don't know why his name's Snake. You don't have to fill everybody blank in. Leave a little bit of blank. Leave some blank. So they had to go in and fill in the prequel. I didn't know it was a prequel because I never bothered reading any of this stuff because it came out when I wasn't being a nerd. So anyway, I read these 3. They're all right. They kind of explain why Dark Elves are bastards, but everybody knew they were bastards, so whatever. For some reason, he's not a bastard. We don't really know why he's not a bastard. He just isn't. Then I listened to Peter Hook inside Joy Division. Joy Division, I was a little bit too young. Little bit, because they were like late 70s. I was born in 1970, so I was aware of them, but only vaguely. I liked New Order. The older I get, the less I like New Order and the more I like Joy Division. There'll come a point where I won't be able to stand New Order because it's a little bit too poppy, a little bit too trendy. And Joy Division was none of that. It was grim, basically. It was like, you want to know what it's like to be from the northwest of England in the 70s and early 80s. Here it is. If you can stomach it, yeah, I can't listen to Joy Division too much. I can't listen to it if I'm not in the right frame of mind. If I've not got any emotional stamina left, don't listen. I can't listen to it. It'll just upset me too much. But if you've got the stamina and you want to, sometimes you like to pick at a scab just to see how it is. Yeah, I mean the fact that you can see Ian Curtis's demise, like some kind of slow motion car crash, but nobody could see it that was close enough to do anything about it. Well, if you listen to they only did a couple of albums, and one of them was posthumously. If you listen to the stuff, you can. It's amazing that nobody could see what was happening to him. But also, sometimes somebody that stands that close to the flame can kind of give you a bit of an insight into life. So, because not everybody can stand as close to the flame as he was standing. Right, Jonathan Pye off the record, just complete garbage in it, but I mean it's worth a listen. I think there were like 10 of his monologues kind of that he was written. Maybe it was if you went to see him on his show, that's what it'd be like. Again, if you're left wing, you'll laugh, ha 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 ha. If you're not left wing, you won't like it at all. So he picks on 10 of the world's biggest wankers, whatever. You can probably guess some of them anyway. I don't know where that other Dritz book has gone, because we're now on to The Crystal Shard, which is actually the first book that had Dritz in it, and he was an accidental character. He wasn't even meant to be in it. I think they had a character that kind of fell by the wayside when they were doing editing, and so they put in this new character, which was this Dritz fellow who then went on to do 1 billion books and be everybody's favourite dark elf. As I said, there was a third book called Sojourn or something that I have read. It maybe will come up in a bit because I don't. It talks about how when they were added rather than when you finished reading them. This was much better. This was. I could actually understand a little bit why people got involved in this. Much better than these two books. Still not as good as the other book that's just on top of it, but certainly more interesting. So maybe 4.5 if I could do 4.5. This book here, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, another old kind of D&D book that I wasn't in Nerdland when this was around. This is a very good book. Very, very good book. And it's just me being nitpicky. I mean, the characterizations are nice. It's all very predictable in that you've got this kind of character and this kind of character. If you were building a D&D party, you'd build it like this. It's effectively like playing a game of D&D but without any friends. You're just listening to a D&D adventure played. And it's nice. If you like D&D, you're going to like this. Fact. A little bit older D&D maybe, so there's no flying Ant-Man, or I'm not playing as a Lizardman or any of this nonsense. So it's kind of traditional Dragonlance-y D&D. Perfect. It makes me laugh that there's a mage in it, Rastlin, I think his name is Racelin or something. And he can only be like a level 2 or 3 mage. He would basically get his arse handed to him by virtually anything, but he's so big on himself. He's like, oh, I am Magi. Do not question me. Do not stand against me. I'm Magi. And he's like, easy, man. You'd have just got backhanded out of the way. But maybe when you're like level 10, all right, fella. And nobody's taking on a level 10 mage in this kind of D&D. No. Oh, there's the Sojourn. So Legend of Drizzt, Book 3, whatever. This is the end of his escaping being a Dark Elf underground and joining the people of above surface, above ground. So, right, what have we got next? Survivor Series 1. Now, where do I stand on these big finish things? The amount of money they want for this kind of thing, full dollar, and it gets worse for some of them, for like Doctor Who and stuff. You got to be nuts. They want like 30 quid for an hour or something. I know you've got to pay for the cast, but I mean, a credit's maybe like, depends on how many you buy and a credit's like £4.50 or something. Even £4.50 feels like not tremendous value, because they quote maybe 3 hours, but of that 3 hours, there's an hour of just filler interviews with cast and shit. So there's maybe only a couple of hours of real content in these big Finnish things, and that some of them are worse than 2 hours content. Some of them you might only get an hour content. I'm not even going near those. They're not even for £4.50. You'll have to do some compilation or something. But Survivors, it's like a guilty pleasure. I really enjoyed the Survivors when it was out. Scared the willies out of me when I was a young lad in the late 70s. They've got the main character still in it. It's a little bit ham-fisted, a little bit forced sometimes. The story's continuity don't hold together. But it's only a few quid. It's a bit of entertainment. Gives you tickles, something you haven't had tickled in a long time. So why not? Why not? Why not? So that's one of my guilty pleasures, paying money for these Survivor things. And then, in true Jeff Bezos, oh, you like something called Survivors, did you? What about The Survivor? Right, so James Herbert novels. Now, I did read some James Herbert when I was an older child. I'm not sure how well they've aged, to be honest. It had an interesting pitch. The ending you could see coming a mile off. And because it was kind of one of these, so there wasn't much warning of the twist at the end, and I had to go back and reread it because it was quite difficult to keep. The story was kind of pedestrian, but it had its shocks and it had its kind of titillations and whatever. I'm not sure the kind of the attitude towards women and stuff would stand up nowadays. But anyway, I lost control of it at the end because sometimes, as I say, concentration drifts, and I had to listen to the end again a bit, and it really wasn't worth. The ending was pretty shit, if I'm being honest. Whatever. It didn't hold to the. It didn't stand the test of time. The Survivors, unfortunately, and I might have got another James Herbert, but they haven't listened to it, and I'm not going down this road much further for sure. Right, I only did Animal Farm. I can't do 1984 yet. I'm not mentally strong enough to deal with probably how true to life it is. Animal Farm's all right. I can see it's a little bit mocking of socialism. If you're on the right of society, you probably enjoy how mocking it is of socialism. I'm not sure socialism is always as bad as it's portrayed here, and it certainly doesn't really give a balance of how bad capitalism can be. If you've got those two, the yin and the yang, it's like, whatever. I can see which side of the argument this is about. Whatever. It's a book that if you haven't read, you should probably read. It's a classic. It's narrated by Stephen Fry. What more do you want? What more do you want? I don't even think I paid for it. I think this was a free one that if you're a member, you could just listen to. So, I mean, Jesus, it didn't even cost anything. And Stephen Fry is about as good a narrator as you could possibly have. So, top banana. Not necessarily my cup of tea. I don't agree with everything in it. So it's like, but it did make some observations that obviously ring true to the human world as well as the four-legged world. Hobbit. I haven't read The Hobbit since I was a kid. Obviously, the films made me feel a bit sick, like they probably made everybody. It's read by Gollum. That was nice enough. He gave it some stick. I think until you reread it, or certainly re-listen to it, you don't realise how much singing and songs and poems and shit are in this. They're a little bit irritating, to be honest, but it's not really aimed at me, so that's cool. I can kind of forgive it. It's not really aimed at me. I certainly would. I'd rather listen to this than bloody put up with watching the films again, for sure. So he's now done the Lord of the Rings. I might try and get into. I'll try and do one this year. This year being 2022. I probably won't do all three because it's just too much. And I've got a Game of Thrones on the go, which is another like 30+ hour one. They're cool, and you certainly get value for money. There's no argument about it. You don't pay much money for it, but do I want to read 3 books a year, or do I want to read? Well, it'll be more than 3, but do I want to read 6 books a year, or do I want to read 20 books a year? That's the question. So anyway, Red Dwarf Infinity welcomes careful drivers. Narrated by Lister. Rimmer, sorry, written by Doug Naylor and Rob Grant. So it's like part of the cast of there. Chris Barry does a really good job of doing accents for everybody. I think the cat's the one that grates the most on me, but Lister and Crichton and Holly, it's not Holly. I think it's the guy. I can't remember the name of the guy before Holly, but him. Very good. I think there's a little bit of a weirdness in that part of the story is taken out of the series, the TV series, and you can almost hear them. The kind of, you can almost see in your mind the TV show saying the same words in the same order, but then they're kind of spun a little bit, and there's kind of a little bit more added in. So maybe like 30% of it's recycled material, I guess, and that's just pulling them about my arse. But it was still more than worth listening to because it was done with a great deal of humour, and the 70% new stuff was fun. I would recommend that wholeheartedly. Uncomfortable Truth About Racism by a footballing hero of mine, John Barnes. This is definitely not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but basically it's all about everybody's just got to accept the fact that they are racist. You might not want to be racist, you might not be that racist, but at the end of the day, you probably are racist. And once we get to the point where we can admit everybody's racist, then maybe we can stop arguing about who's more racist and deal with the actual underlying racism, I guess, is what he's trying to put forward. It was only a few hours and it was read by him, so perfect. Why not support the man? I mean, racism is a curse on all our houses, so the sooner we get rid of it, the better. And yeah, well done, John. Korean War. I was going to get a Vietnam War book, but then I thought, I really don't know much about the Korean War. So then I decided to look at the Korean War, and you could have, it's basically the Vietnam War, but like 15 years earlier or whatever. It's like the mistakes that were made by the Americans, holy moly. Yeah, and then, so the Korean War, why is it not known about? I did watch a film, I can't remember the name of it. There was a film about some hill, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, about the Korean War after this. I've certainly know a lot more about the Korean War than I did, and I certainly know a little bit more about Korea than I did. But it's amazing to think that when people talk of the legacy of, oh, you know, we should never have gone for Vietnam. Well, if you'd have read this, if you'd have understood the Korean War, you probably wouldn't have gone into Vietnam, would you? But you did. And so we're still making the same mistakes now, trying to get involved in wars that can't be won because you can't define what winning even is. How can you win a war if you don't even know what you're fighting to do? But yeah, so anyway. Next one along, I got 5 stars, so it must have been good. Next one along, Shard Lake, Book 1, Dissolution. Recommended by Jim the Gent. It was a good book. I give it 4 stars because I kept hold of it until about the last hour when all the kind of dramatic reveals were done. And again, it was one of these books that it was just hard to keep a hold of the last hour, which is the only really, I mean, it was all good fun, but that's when all the detail was. So I had to actually go back and re-listen to it. And I still don't bloody understand it all, even though I'm not sure there was actually that much underlying twist to it. It just felt, I'm sure it works as a book, but as an audiobook, I found the kind of conclusion a little bit underwhelming in that I didn't really understand it. And then I had to go back and I still really didn't understand it. And the motivation seemed a little bit thin. It was nice. It was like your kind of sharp novel, but not, because there's no bastards in it. So, no swearing. In that, it was a historical novel, and the kind of Shard Lake fellow is an interesting character. He's like an accountant, bean counter, hunchback. Couldn't be, but it took me forever to realise that the Cromwell he was talking about wasn't Oliver Cromwell. It was the kind of Henry VIII's enforcer Cromwell. The kind of yeah, I can't remember his name to hand now, but the kind of Henry VIII's Cromwell rather than Oliver Cromwell. Okay, so a lot of disillusion of the monasteries and all that kind of stuff, which was what it's about, so, and how that impacted life, medieval life. So it was a good story. I learned stuff from it. So yeah, nice book. And then the final one, I did another one of the Survivors Series 2. Just as a little Christmas treat. So that's it. I think I got through about 20-something books this year. I need to rate that, don't I? So you can have there was some continuity errors in this one. One of the key bits that they discovered really early on in the show is that they should stay away from people who haven't been exposed to it, because even though the symptoms are gone of the plague, they killed 3 priests who'd been hiding in like kind of like priests. They kind of hide away doing the priestly stuff on the top of the hill. It was called the Angels of the North or something. I can't remember, the Angels of something. There were 3 angels or something. The episode was called, and yet they met somebody in this set of stories, and just went and kind of joined up with him, even though he hadn't had the plague, because he'd been isolating, because he was sent away by his family, who then died, and he was isolating. Now that either means that they'd already met the Angels of the North, the priests, and killed them, and knew they were going to infect and kill this guy potentially, or this was before in the timeline, because it's kind of sketchy whereabouts actually you are in the timeline of the show. You're in the first season of the show, of the TV show, but it's kind of hard to say whereabouts exactly. So the alternative would be that they should know. Oh no, I've lost my frame of thought now. Whatever, it doesn't matter. And the continuity is not great, and I've been talking for 36 minutes about absolutely nothing. So hopefully the green screen works. Hopefully there's some books here that you may want to listen to, or you might think, maybe I'll give it a go, or maybe you could suggest some books for me. I've got my 24 credits available for this year, so I'm ready to go. Anyway, thanks for listening. Have a good Christmas and New Year, and I've got to stop looking over here. I've got to look over here. See you later.